All right, today I have on Tom Griffen. Tom, I think the first time I met you was on the Appalachian Trail, and I had it in my mind that like no one is allowed to pass me on this trail, right? That was like one of the goals. No one's allowed to pass me, and then we want to get like 15 miles in a day, and then I think it was on day 2 or 3, me and Emma see you just fly by us, and we're like, what the hell? Like this guy should not be going past us. And I was very intrigued to catch you at the next shelter and talk to you and kind of pick your brain about everything. And lo and behold, I found out a good bit about you in a short amount of time and been following you ever since. I think it's been 3 years now, following you on your adventures and some of the stuff that you told us on the Appalachian Trail really inspired me to pursue the ultra endurance stuff. I met you and I met a couple other people that were ultra endurance athletes, and it was always in my mind. Always has that itch I wanted to scratch. And meeting you and meeting them, you guys really one. You made it seem like it was doable because that's what you guys. That's what you told me. It was like it's not as hard as you think it is. It's doable. If you can do the Appalachian Trail, you can do a 100 miler.
Yeah.
But then some of the other stuff, and then come to find out you were a writer and you're very eloquent with your words, and then you've just done a lot over your lifetime. So I want to have you on to kind of talk to you about what it's like to be in the woods for days on time, what it's like to walk across the country, what it's like to travel and put yourself out there. So appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah. Well, Tony, first of all, it's a real pleasure to be sitting here having another conversation with you. I do remember our short, but like I'd say poignant conversations, which is often what happens on the trail, right? You have these brief interactions that are potentially life changing or at least thought changing in a lot of cases. Yeah, I do have to address one thing that you just said. So that idea of not wanting somebody to pass you.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. Like that's, I try not to let that be like a thought at my front and center mind. But make no mistake, like as an athlete, as a competitor, I'm thinking about those exact same things. And you two folks ahead of me, trust me, I was like on the chase as soon as I saw you. And it's the same with anybody up ahead. But I think that the competitive spirit, that where that stems from is is a good thing. And it's not like you're out there trying to do anything negative or bad. It's just more about like the fun of the chase. And I think that that is a great metaphor for life in general, but and I would say it applies really well to the fortunate life that I have led. I enjoy looking ahead, seeing something that may or may not be reachable or accessible even, and I like just kind of buckling in and going for it, because why not? The idea of life being short is real, and the older I've gotten, the more I've really seen that as less cliche and more reality. And so why not? Hey, let's go for it. And if it works, cool. And if it doesn't work, cool. Like who cares? Like we did it and we gave it a shot. So yeah, it's a real treat to be here to chit chat with you a little bit about who knows where this is going to go.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
if it all starts at the Appalachian Trail, man, it's going to go somewhere good. I'm sure about
That's
that.
very true. Very true. And it's interesting you say that with the looking to do like the unachievable things or things that you think like are beyond your capabilities. And I do that myself as well. Like I put myself in situations where it's like, I don't think I can do that, but I don't know until I try. Right. And for me, that fits well with my personality. Like the idea of setting incremental goals of like, I've done something similar, so I know I feel comfortable that I can probably do this too. Is not it's not big enough for me to like have that pressure to face that challenge, right? I need something that's like, there's no way I can do this. Like with the ultra endurance races, I'm like, I'm 240 pounds, like I shouldn't be able to do this, but I think I can. So like, why not? And
Yeah.
whether you get there or not, your ability to push yourself beyond what you think you're capable of, you learn so many life lessons along the way. and you find out really that you're capable of more than you ever thought you could be. So I resonate with that idea of like setting these lofty goals that you think are scary, and you think like, probably not going to get there, but like, why not, right?
Yeah, why not? The one of the most important learning moments of my life, and staying in the theme of endurance athletics and such, was an absolute, like, quote, failure in the eyes of the participants. I started and did not finish a race, but that race to this day is probably the most important race I ever ran. And I've got a couple 100-mile finishes under my belt, which, in the world of these days, in the world of ultra marathoning, like, a couple is kind of what everybody's got. It ain't nothing special about that. My sweet spot was the 50 miler, but I mean, that's neither here nor there. This other race, it was another 100-miler. I only made it to mile 89, and my wheels started to fall off. And I mean, all of the details in hindsight were very clear and obvious, but I'm not going to go into the whole race report with you now. But the bottom line is I had to drop out of that race, and that race taught me more about myself than the races that I actually trained for and finished successfully. So I think on some level, I want failure. And failure is not the right word. I want to say yes as often as possible, knowing that they're not always going to reach fruition. I want there to be turmoil, because I think that's where I'm going to have something rich to take away. I want there to be problems. I want there to be challenges and things that are going to put me up against the wall and force me to think differently. So, I, even in the moment when I was getting medevaced off the mountain at mile 89 with like a resting heart rate of 100 plus 120 beats per minute or something nutty, like I was in a bad way. Even in that moment, I turned to my pacer and I was like, hey man, this edge that I'm experiencing right now is a gift. To know what my limit is today is such a gift, because now I can train potentially in a way with this being the goal, as opposed to the 100-mile tape that I have to cross. This personal thing that I'm now able to look at with my own two eyes is such a rich thing to have access to.
Yeah. Now, have you always had that perspective of seeing difficult things or seeing failures as like, what can I glean positive from this, as opposed to, what went wrong? I'm a failure. Like, I couldn't do it, and 80 other people finished it. Like, what was there a shift in your life that made you change your perspective from looking at the negatives to looking at the positives, or is that just a personality trait that you've always had?
I can't claim that it's a personality trait that I've always had. No way. If anything, I was completely out of touch with any depth of myself until I was I'd say a reasonably older young adult, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, I just didn't really have much of a clue, and I wasn't really an introspective. I mean, I think I was an introspective person, but I didn't know that's what I was doing. I was thoughtful. I looked inward. I didn't quite see the very obvious value of maybe processing little moments to try to glean maybe lessons and big things. I was just winging it, and I winged it for a long time, even beyond my childhood. I think I was probably in my 30s before I started to hit the brakes and say, hold on a second. Like, I think I think I can do this a little bit different. And I didn't need to change much because I was already doing it, but my perspective shifted. And I don't know that there was one thing, as you asked, if was there a moment. I don't know that there was necessarily a moment. I mean, perhaps it had to do with the end of a relationship, and I think the timing is coincidentally, aligned with something like that. But it wasn't like, I got hit with that lightning bolt per se. I think it was the culmination of just kind of being a knucklehead for a long time and not really taking life too seriously. And then having the luxury and the privilege of life sort of being handed to me. I think it wasn't until my 30s that I started truly making conscious efforts to do the things that I was actually choosing to do, as opposed
Mm.
to the things that were sort of falling in my lap just by the nature of my fortunate life. I didn't want that to happen anymore. I wanted to some degree take control, or that's not control is not the word, but I wanted to be in charge of what my trajectory started at, not
Yeah.
knowing where it was going. And I think that realization, I think it just came through very late blooming maturation of self. And it came late, man. I, I'm just lucky. I'm just lucky that it came at all. But I think that's probably what
Yeah.
it stems from. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Luck plays such a huge role in who we become in life, and I think we put more emphasis on our abilities to make changes in our life versus how lucky we got to have those changes be made upon us, right? Based on maybe who we met as a coach growing up or who our parents were. Like all these things were just random flips of the coin that we got lucky to do. And I always tell people, this idea that I'm a hard worker and I can hang my strap on that and be like, yeah, I work hard, I outwork everyone. I just built that discipline in me. And it's like, well, no, like I got so lucky to see my mom raise me and my brother and like do whatever it took. She was our baseball coach. She was, our chef. She was like everything. And then my dad was a hard worker. And I just was lucky enough to see all that. Then I got into the military. So it was like these string of events that were all purely luck driven that made me the hard worker that I am. So when I see people that don't work as hard, I'm not like, oh yeah, I'm better than you because anyone can work hard. It's like I just got so lucky to be in this situation, and I think that perspective one creates empathy for other people, which I think is really important to do. But it also gives you like this sense of urgency of like, what am I going to do with this luck? What am I going to do with this opportunity that was placed upon me that isn't placed upon anyone else? And like, how can I take advantage of that? And I think maybe that's what culminated for you, this idea of like, yeah, I'm very lucky to be in this position. Let me quit wasting these opportunities, maybe.
Maybe so. I like the way you just framed that, because it got me thinking a little bit differently. Because luck, and I know I use that word, but I think what I would say I'm lucky for is is maybe less of the things that you just named, like less of the parental participation, less
Mhm.
of the maybe the so-called good things that maybe a good childhood would potentially afford. I think where I can now look back and see the silver lining of maybe lack of guidance and lack of nudging in any direction was the fact that I maybe had it in me. Maybe the innate me is truly somebody who's able to kind of make whatever work,
Mhm.
and put me in whatever situation. I'm gonna make it work. And as a kid, I didn't really have many boundaries. There was no real like box that said don't cross out of this line. Like I could kind of do and live however I chose. And luck played a part in allowing me to live in that space without damaging
Right.
myself, physically, mentally. I mean, we all have our stuff, right? I've got things I'm carrying around still from that, but I was able to navigate that even as a young person in a relatively successful way. And without those boundaries, though, I was very quick to jump in whatever comfort spaces were plopped in front of me, until I finally decided that that's not how I wanted to live. So the luck in this case is like, I'm lucky that it was messy. I'm lucky
Yeah.
that it was a bit of a mess,
Yeah.
because
And
I
you're
think
lucky
that,
that you had the personality to not
right,
allow that mess to, detract you to go to jail or to go to this or to go
right,
to that.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. One of the things you also touched on was this idea, as I look more into like the mental health and mental disorders that we're dealing with now, as a epidemic in society, is this idea of agency and hope. And it sounds like there was a point in time where you wanted to take agency for your life, and you were lucky enough to be able to put yourself in that situation to do it. But the real struggle, I think, for a lot of people is this lack of, does life happen to me, or can I happen to impart myself into my life, right?
mhm,
And you said once you hit 30, like you were able to take that choice, that opportunity, that agency in your life, and then that's when things clicked. And I think about this all the time, like how can I make an intervention that improves people agency? Because I think if we can improve people's agency and hope, I think that can lift a lot of people up from the mental health disorders that we're seeing across. So I always think about that as like,
mhm.
what's an intervention? Like what's a thing that we can do to give hope to people? And for you, that just clicked, and that sense of agency allowed you to navigate life in a way that you wanted to now, instead of having life navigate you in the direction that life was telling you to go into. And I think that's like a very special moment for each person. And I'm like, if we can start implementing that in the youth, or in places of low socioeconomic status, or places of mental health disorders, I think that can begin to like help lift us from this fog that we have of class discrepancy, but also mental health disorders and things like that. So it's interesting that that was a thing that clicked for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And, I think I, of course, don't know the answer to this great pondering that you've just now thrown on the table. Because yes, wouldn't it be cool if there was a formula that we could somehow plug in? I do think it boils down to people, though, but to the people around us, or even, and it doesn't need to be a lot. Like, I mean, I still hear the singular voices of the occasional people that just popped into my life who said maybe one thing in passing that they probably have no recollection of, right? That, and we all have these people in our life, but for some reason I remembered like those voices, and I think the collection, the stacking up of those voices over time were part of what pushed things, in the direction that began my current trajectory. So I think this boils down to being impeccable with our choice of words.
Yeah.
Language is really important. How we communicate with each other obviously is important, but I think truly taking time to be careful and and be gracious and humble with our language as a gift to the recipient of that language, with the possible understanding that that word might be something that years from now they lean into as something that saves their life. It's not, that's not hyperbole. That's real life. That stuff happens. And so I think that that's where kindness matters. That's where,
Mm.
showing up with a tender voice matters. Even if we're not feeling those things, our responsibility is to bring those things to the forefront. And and that'll be a lifelong challenge for anybody who's choosing to enlist that as a part of their life, but make no mistake, it's making a difference, from the Uber driver to the checker at the grocery store, like to just the passing person. A glance, a gesture changes everything. Like, it's the smallest gestures that affect the biggest changes. So why don't we lean into that? So maybe rather than it being formulaic, maybe it's just about us looking at our hearts and saying, am I willing to show you my heart?
Mm.
Because if I can honestly say the answer to that is yes, then odds are my voice will follow suit, and I can humble myself before anybody that I'm standing or sitting across, and we can share a moment of good that that will that will resonate. And if that's a strong resonance, man, right now we need that.
Yeah. Yes, we
I
do.
mean, we
Yeah.
always do, but surely.
Yeah. The idea that everyone has a story to tell is the way that I look at it, from like a psychological lens of like, everyone is interesting. It's up to you to kind of get that out of them, right? It's up to you to create a space of vulnerability so that person can
Yes.
tell their story.
Yes.
And I think kindness is one of those ways of doing it. And like you said, like you just don't really truly understand the impact you have on people as you go through your day-to-day life. And it is a choice how you treat people, and one of the things that you probably, encounter, or maybe not encounter, but you may not even note it, but like running into you on the Appalachian Trail, you've come up a lot in conversations of me and Emma since that time of like, oh, did you see Tom? Like he's going on the trail. Like, that's awesome. Let's follow him. Let's see what he's doing. Or did you see his Substack posts, or did you read his book? And like, just because you were nice to us, and just because you told your story, and you were interested, and you were able to bring about this idea of like, man, I feel happier and better after talking to Tom, even though I don't really know him that well, so like it comes up a lot of like, oh, like what's he doing now? What's he up to now? So the fact that we only saw you maybe probably like 3 hours in total on the trail, maybe, and
Maybe.
it's like we've been talking about you incrementally over the last 3 years because you had a positive impact on us without even trying to. So you're right; those little things
Yeah.
bring immense value to people, and excitement, and joy in life. And it's just as simple as like, yeah, being kind.
Yeah. Well, those words, I don't take those words lightly. That's a real nice compliment, and I appreciate you sharing that. But make no mistake, like we're connected as a result of that short minute in time that we had, right? And like you, I've been following your doctoral education in Oklahoma, your move there initially, and then talking to Emma about tattoo artists in Cleveland, and then subsequently her writing. Like this, there's a blossoming on both sides that happened, and that's the beauty of showing up in a vulnerable space with another human being and giving them a chance to be vulnerable by simply showing up. And I think the trail, if we can circle back to that, like the trail is a great place for that to happen.
Yeah.
uh, and any trail I think affords this vulnerability. If you show up to the trail with something besides that, you're probably missing out. You still might get it done and can check it off your list, and that's fantastic. But I think the depth of a hike, whether it be a long or a short hike, doesn't really matter. But the depth of it probably comes from showing up with maybe your veil pulled to the side a little bit and being open and willing to take in someone's story and then giving them a chance to hear yours. And in 5 minutes, so much can happen, as we've just named.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, when you're exhausted at the end of a day, you don't really think about having a cover over you. You're just like free and in nature, and you're just exhausted, and you're like, I don't even know the words that are coming out of my mouth, but like I'm talking to you, and it's a good time. And there's something about like exhaustion, nature, can't, like, all that stuff does allow you to be a vulnerable, different person. You don't have to be as restrictive, you don't have to be as confined, you don't have to be as protective, because we talk about it, me and Emma talk about it all the time, this idea of like everyone on a trail seems to be so like happy and excited to be out there because you choose to be out there, right? You don't just stumble upon a trail and you're like, I guess I'm hiking it. It's like,
Right.
those type of people are the type of people that are going to open up and that are going to talk, and it does make it magical, to be out there. And we'll continue to talk about that a little bit more, but
Yeah.
before we do, I'd like to get a little bit of a deeper background of some of the explorations that you had, some of the things that um, you know transformed you into the person that you are today, through whether it be life, business, the expeditions that you've been on. Just a little bit more insight into who you are, and what you've done with your life.
Yeah, sure. Well, I won't give you the full here. I was born on this day. It was a sunny day type of stuff. But part of I think, who I am does trace back, surely, or how I move through the world traces back to the way my family came up. We moved around a lot. My dad's job bounced us around. And so uh, me, and I've got four siblings, we got comfortable kind of getting to know people, new people on a semi regular basis. And it wasn't like being in a military family where you move every couple years and it's just like rattling off. We moved and then stayed long enough to really get some roots down, and then we'd uproot. So arguably that's a different sort of scenario. You know, you're
Right.
building deep relationships, then tearing them down, or at least, you know, changing things drastically. So, but we did a lot of moving around, and I think that idea of that comfort with a certain degree of discomfort has been thematic since for as long as I can remember. So I similar to you. I don't know exactly your timeline, but I went directly into the military right out of high school. I went into the Army. I told my parents it was because I wanted to follow in the family tradition of military service, which was very much a half truth. My father was unemployed and my mom wasn't making much money, and I saw it as the only way for me to at some point pay for college, which my maturity level was probably not ready for college. So it was probably a great decision, one of the best decisions I would say I probably made at that moment in my life. But spent 4 years in the military, and you know, that's a whole different podcast. But the military, I wouldn't trade it. But I don't really have any good things to say about my experience in the
Hmm.
service. I was in the early, right in 1990, right as the very beginnings of the Desert Storm conflict began. And you know, during basic training, they told us we were going to go. We were all going to graduate from basic as soon as we qualified with our weapon. And they were going to send us to the desert. Like that's what they told us. It scared the hell out of me. Like
Yeah.
I think that psychosomatically, I just couldn't hit the target with my weapon when you know when we would qualify. Because I'm actually a real good shot, and I always had been, but I,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, I couldn't do it. And I think it was because I was really afraid. I was afraid of what they were saying, which because I took it at face value. Like, hey, we're all gonna go die. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna try to hurry that up. Y'all can go. I'm staying behind because I can't hit the target. But my I had a very non-military experience in the service. But I think there's a lot of trauma that comes from being in the military simply by the nature of uh, accepting the fact at some point during your training that are you're going to kill somebody. You know, I think that there's a certain amount of, and I'll just simplify and call it brainwashing, but I think it's necessary. It's a necessary component of any armed service.
Right.
When you know, I think that that's just part of the deal, and they've got it down. You know, I think there's a reason why the things are done in a certain way. But I distinctly remember at some point in my early time in the army, like when I finally did qualify with my doggone weapon, I couldn't. I mean, take. I almost reluctantly say this because it doesn't reflect me now, but I couldn't wait for an opportunity to do what I was trained to do.
Yeah.
I absolutely was chomping at the bit to do things that me as just a person before and surely afterwards would never think. Like my brain was thinking exactly as I had been trained to think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
And
powerful training tool.
powerful training tool for sure. And you know, the idea of, you know, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. You know, you got to kind of like beat the system to win the system, and all the little adages that you learn. And I took seriously. I mean, when I finally did get out, like it took me a long time to sort of get beyond those ideas and become a different version of
Yeah.
myself. Still a knucklehead, but a different version of
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I won't belabor that section. But that was a pivotal 4 years in my young life, and you know, I still write about it. I still think about it. I still, you know, hear the voices of both the good and the bad folks that I cross paths with. But it was a very influential moment in time that I wouldn't trade. Like as much, you know, damage as it maybe did psychologically, I think it was important, also more important than it was damaging, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a common trend that I see with people that come in and out of the military. Because I'm interviewing a lot of veterans right now for a research paper on PTSD and whether therapy worked for them or whether it didn't work for them, and what are some of the key characteristics of maybe why that was successful and not. And you very much get it was the worst thing I've ever done and it was the best thing I ever done, but everyone says like I wouldn't trade it because
Hmm.
it was very formidable part of my life. And as you look at like the neuroscience, that 18 to 21, we still have this malleable prefrontal cortex. That's when it's doing most of the changing and the work. So it's very easy to manipulate. It's very easy to shape who you are and your ability to make decisions and how you see yourself in the world. And that's one of the times where you can get that hijacked, and they do a great job of hijacking that. I mean, the whole idea of boot camp is to um, tear you down from who you thought you were, your individual self, and make you a team, a unit that is going to go to bat for the people around you. So you become less of I and you become more of me, which is beautiful in so many ways. Like you dissolve the ego that you thought you had, but when done in a negative scenario, it can very much create this us versus them. We're the good guys, they're the bad guys, so therefore we can do whatever we want to them. And it does give you this mindset when you look back on it, you're like, who the hell was that? But it also makes you think like, could that happen to me again? Right? Because
Hmm.
there is this whole idea when you look at the research of like, would you be a Nazi supporter, sympathizer in Nazi Germany, or would you try to risk your life, risk your family's life, and save the Jewish people? And everyone, right, is gonna be like, yo, I would totally save the Jewish people, right? And it's like, well, history and research shows that like that's likely not going to happen, right? You're not that person. And we should study those people more than we should study the ones that would do that. But it is this idea of like, it's so easy to become the person that you don't want to be based on the environment and the people around you. And I think understanding that allows you to look at people maybe that you disagree with a more empathic light, because you know especially now with politics, right? You can clearly see there's brainwashing going on, and like people are going to look back 10 years from now and they're going to be like, that wasn't who I like really am. And we
Sure.
experienced that in the military. And it is a formidable part of your life that creates a lot of positive things like discipline, motivation. I always tell people like, find a job that you don't want to do and you'll learn to do, like, then you'll start searching for the things that you love to do. And the military was one of those things for me where it was like,
Uh,
it was a great experience. I got to work with some of the best special forces guys, and got to see some of the best fighters on the planet. But I was also like, I don't want to do this for a living. Like, what am I going to do when I get out? And I started to formulate this future plan that like 18-year-old me was never even thinking of the future, which is how I ended up in the military. So I do understand, and it is a very common sentiment of like, it was transformative, and I would never change it, but I hate it or I love it. Yeah, there's no in between.
no, it's all in or all out. But yeah, I wouldn't change it. It sort of set the stage for me getting out to kind of use that gung ho. Like I got out with that hard charging and that hard charging mindset. I think I brought to the table too. So it was just my fire was fed by that. And I went into the world of education. So I became a teacher and I taught in private schools mostly, or I worked with in positions that didn't require a credential, and so I just kind of like figured out how to not work the system, but I understood a system that allowed me to jump right in and
Yeah.
do it rather than have to go through a couple years of schooling to pull it off first. So yeah, I mean, at 22, I was teaching PE with no prior experience. I think the military was my prior experience that I put down on my one-line resume, and and then by the time I was 25 years old, I was my title was I was the assistant, or no, I was the dean of discipline was my title at a
That's
private high
that's an
school,
amazing
which is
title.
like it sounds like some kind of I don't know. It doesn't really sound like a professional title, but nonetheless, this high school was a private school. It was fed by international students and college prep, but I had no degree. and I taught for a year, and then at that school, and then was an administrator. So I figured out how to navigate a complex professional world in a way that put me in really interesting places at a young age. And I joke now when I look back, or when I was in my early 30s, I used to joke that my resume made me look like I was on the lam, because I had done so many disparate things. I was a roofer. I worked as a teacher for multiple years. I was an administrator for a while. I spent time as a consultant in my late 20s. Like I did things that just didn't go together. But
Right.
like I said, like my life was a series of opportunities that were just sort of thrown in front of me. And I immediately just said, why not? Give it a
Yeah.
go. Give it a go. And then, so my 20s was kind of, let's sample everything. Uh, and and then my 30s was when I started to be a little bit more discerning. And my 30s is when I got into endurance sports. I was always a runner. I was always an athlete. But and I would always kick the tires on doing long distance stuff, but I didn't really know what that world looked like. And I think at some point I read an article about Western States 100 miler. And I think, and the thing I remember about the article was that they talked about it as the 100-mile buffet. And this idea that you could eat all this random food over the course of 100 miles, that sounded interesting to me,
Yes.
But yeah, so that like planted, the weirdest things plant like the most pivotal seeds. And in my case, for running, that's what it was for me. And I started signing up. But yeah, so education turned into a career. At some point, it kind of leveled out where I was teaching high school special education. And again, didn't know what I didn't know. Said yes to a job, and it was probably similar to the military, the hardest, worst job I ever had, but also the most rewarding, best job I ever had. Working with a real diverse, difficult group of
Mm.
students whose cultures and lives I had zero context for.
Yeah.
Uh, but what I was able to bring to the table was probably something that came from all of these curious and different background jobs that I have had. It was the ability to just show up with empathy. Like I was really interested in what folks had to say. I was really interested in what they were feeling. I was really interested in
Mm.
giving them space to share. And that became probably the absolute best trait that I had as an educator. Uh, I could teach, sure, but I mean, I was working with 18-year-old people who couldn't read, couldn't do math, and I wasn't going to change their life by teaching them any degree
Right.
of, you know, algebra or, reading lessons. We sat and talked about just life, and that became my classroom, which, like I said, was the hardest thing to ever endure, listening to these folk stories, but also then uh, really rich because we kind of created family that we all needed. I
Yeah.
needed it. They needed it. They didn't know I needed it, but I did.
Right.
And I still look back on those days as them enriching my life as much as I damn sure hope I did theirs. Um, yeah, and then at some point along the way, I took a part-time job at a running store. And honestly, man, I just took that job because I just wanted to interact with adults. I would have just volunteered and helped these folks sell shoes and talk about running. I didn't care about the
Yeah.
money. I just wanted I needed adult time, big time.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I started working, a couple hours a week, and it led to more hours a week. And I fell in love with the opportunity to sit across from somebody who had a similar passion as mine.
Hmm.
And over time, I started developing more and more knowledge that I could share. And now I was able to kind of bring my the teaching side of me to this retail space that, I didn't care about selling stuff, but I cared about giving people information.
Right.
And I just fell in love with the model of business that particular store did. And on a goof, one day, I said to the owner of that store, this was in Sacramento, I said, hey, if there's ever an opportunity for a guy with no money to own one of these stores,
Mm.
I'm your guy. And I kind of said it laughing, knowing that, of course, that would never happen. I had no
Right.
capital. I was a middle school, special ed teacher. I think I was making like $30,000 a year at the time, and in California, and
Right.
even then I was below the poverty line, not poverty line, but I was not making money. I certainly
Yeah.
wasn't saving.
That's a hard living out there in California on 30, 40 grand.
Yeah, that's even 20 years ago. But nonetheless, an opportunity came up, and he pulled me into his office a couple years later and said, hey, remember that thing you said about owning a store? Well, the franchise has got an opportunity for me to kind of henpeck a staffer who's showing abilities and willingness to take this on. You interested? And I said yes, without knowing where the store was or what the details look like. I just said, absolutely, I'm all in. Again, like just kind of like rolling with whatever fell into my lap.
Yeah.
Uh, and that began I think my bigger career in the running industry, which I still am now connected, but now I'm sort of on the consulting side of things. So I own that store. It happened to be in Santa Cruz, thank goodness, Santa Cruz, California, where it's a half a
Gorgeous.
mile to the beach and a half a mile
Yeah.
to mountainous redwoods. Like, it was paradise. But yeah, I owned a store for a couple years, realized it wasn't for me. And now that I'm telling this story, I think one of the pivotal moments, as you asked before, was it came as the result of running that store.
Mm.
So running a store is not easy. And unless you've been an entrepreneur, it's hard to fathom the amount of mental energy that goes into trying to keep any sort of entrepreneurial endeavor alive. You're all in. You don't have time to turn off. I didn't
Right.
take a day off for 2 years. Literally, that's I worked every day. My staff would ask me to take a day off, and I never did. It wasn't that I didn't trust him. It wasn't that I, had negative thoughts about it. I just didn't want to miss anything that was otherwise an opportunity to grow the business. And I took over when I stepped into the store. It was a failing store. By all rights, I probably should have closed the doors. And within 2 years, we were we were selling more than $1 million worth of shoes, socks, insoles, and accessories. So I turned it around. Is the long and the short of that. But it came at a cost. I stopped running. I put on a bunch of weight. I was unhealthy. I was eating pizza every night. Like, I was working late into the night and waking up early to come back in and do it all over again. And the pivotal moment that I'm talking about here is I remember I was at work one night, or I was at work. It was 11 o'clock at night. Everybody was home except me, and my phone rang. And it wasn't a cell phone back then. It was just the landline phone rang. I picked it up thinking, oh, it's a customer calling, whatever. They're not going to expect me to answer. Well, it was one of my mentors, one of the people who I had since developed a really close professional relationship with, who was really, like, everything he said was sort of a gold nugget. And
Mm.
to this day, he's still one of my dearest friends. But back then, he was just like a mentor who saw me as opportunity to help him grow his business. And he called me at 11 o'clock at night, and he said, what are you doing? What are you doing at work? And I'm like, well, I got this to do and this to do and this to do. And he said, I just need you to know that there's no longevity in what you're doing. And you are going to burn out. It's just a matter of time. Like,
Yeah.
you will stop. Your body will force you to stop. It might still be years until that happens, but it's coming. So just heads up, maybe make some changes,
Yeah.
you know? And about 6 months later is when my time can't when the time that I was, that burnout that he predicted was happening,
Yeah.
and things were just falling apart around me. And the moment in time that changed me was when I admitted to myself that I could not do it anymore.
Mm.
And I called him and told him, and I said, I need help. And I think that's probably the first time in my life where I used those words aloud to somebody that I was not like angling.
Right.
I think I might have said that in the past, but for self-serving reasons. In this case, I said it because I didn't have anything else. I
Yeah.
needed help. I said, I need help. I can't, on paper, I'm successful, but this is not going to work for me. And I don't know what to do. And him being an amazing leader, an amazing human who saw people's heart, said, I got you. And the details came later, but he gave me a place to land.
Yeah.
And that moment, I think, made me aspire to become that. I want to be a place for other people to land, and not, I don't want to put it all on me, but I want to offer opportunities like that for people around me, because probably tracing it back to that moment when it was such an integral moment for me, and for the forward momentum of my life.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's something about this idea of, verbally admitting that you can't do it on your own. Right. And you're like being extremely vulnerable and
yes,
being at this low point thinking like, man, my whole life I've been able to navigate, and my whole life I've been able to be the person that can do everything. And
right.
now I can't. And who's going to be there for me? Right. And that's one of those things that you just don't truly know until you get to that point. And then lucky for you, you had somebody that was going to be there for you. Right.
So lucky, so
Because you could
lucky.
you could easily see this idea of you being extremely vulnerable, you being at the bottom, you reaching out, and that mentor saying like, hey, figure it out, man. You're on your own. I got my own life problems, right? And
Right.
that could have caused you to go into a completely different trajectory, right? But he was there for you, and he helped you, and he gave you a plan. And it was like, oh man, like life's much easier when I'm not just trying to do it all by myself.
Man, you're saying it right there.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
But in that, I think for so many folks, and I don't know, for me, I can speak for myself for sure. Like being willing to see myself in a weak, and that weak's not the right word, but as having weaknesses that are obvious and public, it that's a lifelong process of realizing that that's okay. In fact, it's probably better, more important to name those things, to avail yourself to those things with people, to then make yourself a stronger person. Um,
Yeah.
yes, if take the people away, take people out of anything you do, and it's not going to be as much fun. It's probably going to be more of a grind. Like you might feel some self satisfaction, but it's going to be, it's not as good as it could be if there were people involved. Everything's more fun when you can do it with somebody else. And but I think a lot of that it asks us to trust. It asks us to maybe eschew the wiring that we came up with and become a different version of ourselves. And something needs to happen in order for us to see that as an option, let alone actually making it happen.
Yeah.
Because that's the scariest thing. I think honesty about our own shortcomings is, well, for me, has probably in my life been the hardest thing to manage. And I've reached now a point though where looking at that stuff, like I want to find all that now. Now I'm
Right.
like, oh, let's name it. Let's talk. Let's throw it all out there. Like, because once you realize that shit makes it like just feels good to like feel, it just brings out a better version of you. Like that's all I want to do. I want to look inward and then practice outward. And I don't want to hide that stuff anymore. But I spent a
Yeah.
lot of years, Tony, spent a lot of years, following the programming that I was told. I was told about what it is to be, a man, what it is to be a professional, what it is to be an athlete. All those voices, man, all those voices I've had to just like squelch, and and then henpeck the voices that were out there too, but that didn't get much. And then of course, the more you then give yourself over to that, the more you surround yourself with those people. And next thing you know, you've got a community of folks
Yeah.
who are we're uplifting each other's journeys like this. And
Right.
I
Yeah.
think that's when life, I don't know, they say middle age is when your life gets rich, starts getting like
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
rich and full. I don't know, maybe that's true. I'm feeling
Yeah. Yeah,
that.
there is this point in life where you quit serving yourself, right? So everything you do in life is to serve you. So you want to start a business to make money, you want to be the best athlete. So you reach out to the people that can kind of guide you along that path, and they're going to tell you all the things that serve you best. But then there's a point in time where it's like, I'm just really tired of serving myself. It's very unfulfilling. It's very empty. Like, can I what can I do to start serving others? And
Yeah.
then that's when you become more introspective of like, okay, well, in order to serve others, I have to figure out all the flaws that I have in me so that I'm better able to serve others. All the things that I've been hiding to allow me to pursue entrepreneurship and being the best athlete. Now I have to expose those things and not necessarily fix them, but like learn how they're part of my personality and how can I get the best out of them, or how can I suppress the negative things so that I can start serving other people to the best of my abilities, and uplifting other people's lives.
Yeah.
Because like you said, when that happens to us, it's the best feeling of the world. So how can we get there? How can we get to those people, and how can we start serving them? And for me, there was a point in my life where that flipped to being less self-serving and more serving others. And as soon as you do that, it's like, I want to be a better person for other people, not for myself. Like, I've been dealing with myself for a long time. Like, I like who I am. There's nothing wrong with who I am, but like, let me shift things so that I can start serving other people and like lift up their life, and maybe have a potential opportunity to bring them some joy, as opposed to just thinking about joy for myself. And whether that's
Yeah.
age, whether that's a point in life where you had somebody do it for you, it's hitting rock bottom. Like, whatever it is, you're gonna get there, and when you get there, it just like life opens up for you in a different way, and it's very exciting once you're there.
Yeah. Tony, when I did my walk across the US, there's a fella. I mean, can I share a quick anecdote?
Of course.
Yeah. So a little backstory, only because I think it makes better sense. So I started this walk across America because I had a goal, and the goal stemmed from a 25 from something I had read 25 years before I took my first step on this journey. I was sitting in a barber shop, fresh out of the military, and I was waiting to get my hair cut. I was still getting a high and tight, like even out of the military. I was still going in there asking for like the fade, and waiting in line though, because it was a popular barber shop. And so I grabbed an old magazine off the magazine rack, and it was a National Geographic from 1977, April of 1977. And there was an article in there about a guy who walked across the United States. And uh, it was, back in those days, National Geographic had the best photo essays, and so it was this great text, great photos, and I just devoured this 30-page spread about this dude that walked across America. Because in my mind, I'm like, what? You
Yeah.
can you can do this? And I had no context for this or anything like this, and it just blew my mind. I knew when I was done reading that I was gonna someday make this happen. I think I even told the barber that, and he just looked at me like I was some kind of idiot. But anyway, fast forward 25 years, I'm sitting on my hands for this quarter century, and I decide I'm going to go finally make this happen. Well, in my mind, when I started that walk in Los Angeles, I was only thinking about the Atlantic Ocean. It's 3,000 miles away, and first day of my walk, I can't wait until I'm done. Like, that's where my head is. I'm just
Yeah.
obsessed with every step. I'm walking really fast. I'm walking past people. People are calling out to me. Like, I'm just like beelining to nowhere. I'm to a place that's 6 months at least away from me. And that becomes thematically how I move through the majority of the state of California. And I barely get to the border of California, Arizona, and I'm injured. And I gimp across the border there across the Colorado River, and I call somebody, and again, another phone call. Hey, I can barely move. Like, my tendonitis is so bad that I can't even take a step. I think I need to take a break. Well, that break was a month-long break.
Yeah.
During that month-long break, I reflected on what had just happened. All right. I barely remember the last 3 weeks of walking because I was going too fast. I was ignoring folks' suggestions to go to this neat place, to see this, or to come to their house for dinner, or go, I was a man on a mission. And the
Right.
mission was like really long away, but I was ignoring opportunities because I was too busy focused on me. There was one exchange I had though that I suddenly like recognized the poignancy of while I was sitting on my couch with my foot up, icing it back home, moping around. I didn't even want to leave the house because all my friends thought that I was, walking across America. I was
Right.
afraid to be in public. So I remember this interaction that I had with a fella named Art. Now, I met Art at a crossroads in Pomona, California, so just east of LA. And at that point, I was still cruising along, didn't have a sore foot yet. It was coming, but I didn't have it yet. And Art is in a wheelchair. And Art and I both reached the pedestrian crosswalk at the same time, and we've got a red hand. So we're waiting together. And I feel Art looking me up and down, top to bottom, you know? And at some point, he looks over at me, and I look over at him, and we meet eyes, and he says, "Hey, man, what the hell are you doing?" Now, at that point in my journey, I had a backpack on, but he could tell that maybe I looked different than other dudes that were wearing a backpack on that street. I don't know. Anyhow, Art and I rolled for like the next 5 blocks together, just chit chatting and telling each other stories. And I'm telling him what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. He's telling me about why he's in a wheelchair and how it's not a permanent thing, but he's, for now, it's what he's dealing with. We're just getting to know each other a little bit. And at some point, Art stops his wheelchair and he kind of turns it and like shifts it a bit on a dime to face me. And we stop in the middle of the sidewalk. And Art says to me, "Hey man, this thing that you're doing, this long walk, it's pretty damn cool." He's like underlining it. He said, "This thing is really cool what you're doing. But I need to remind you that what you're doing, it ain't about you."
Hmm.
He said, "This thing that you're doing, it's about me." And he's pointing to himself. He goes, "It's about me. It's about that guy who you're going to potentially talk to at the next red light. It's about those people that are driving by you, wondering what the hell you're doing, walking as far as you're going." He goes, "This thing you're doing is really damn cool. Please do not lose sight of that. But make no mistake, this walk that you're doing is about us. And if you miss that, you're going to get to the end of this walk and you're going to have missed all the opportunities. Your drive is what got you out here. But if you take time to talk to me, I assure you, I'm going to go home and I'm going to think about this time that we just had together. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to think about your big thing. And now I'm going to be thinking about my big thing. And I'm going to think about what I could do that might be out of my comfort zone, just like you're doing your thing out of your comfort zone. And now my life is potentially changed having crossed your path. Your walk is about me." And at that moment, I heard that,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't sink in. It sunk in when I was reflecting on that story back home, feeling sorry for myself with my foot up, remembering, that I'm racing all these miles, going too far, too fast. And it was in that moment when I thought of Art, when I was like, all right, if my foot gets better and I'm able to go back where I planted the flag in the sand, I'm changing everything. I'm not going to be focused on distance. I'm not going to be focused on mileage or where I need to be and when. I'm not going to think about the doggone Atlantic Ocean. I'm just going to think about walking. And I'm going to open myself up to the likes of other people. My goal will still be my goal, but it's going to be moved down on the priority list. It'll happen, but I'm going to open myself up to the other unknowns that art is advising me to, make sure I don't lose sight of. And Tony, everything changed
Yeah.
from literally the day my foot healed, first of all, and from the day that I showed back up to where I had left off, I just started meeting an endless line of people that would stop and chat, that would interact with me at what. Now I was bringing a different openness and vulnerability to the table, and they were bringing that too. So we were like magnetically attracting each other, right? It
Hmm.
wasn't just this randomness. My choice allowed that to happen, and in doing that, I met roadside saints. I met people who told me stuff that I still think about every single day.
Yeah.
I still get a random phone call from people that I met like for 5 minutes, just like, you and I.
Right.
They still call me up every now and again. Hey, Tom, just thinking about you. What you up to? And then we'll get on the phone and chit chat, catch up about this and that. But it stems back to art. Art reminded me. Art told me like the biggest lesson that I think I probably needed that just in life as much as I needed it for that walk. It's not about me. It's important for me to choose to do big things. That we can't forget that. Like big-minded folks need to do big-minded things,
Mhm.
but we need to remember that what we're doing is as much influencing the people around us as it is us and our livelihood. And yeah.
Yeah. It's this idea of you want to rush through life to get to the finish line, but then when you
Mm.
get to the finish line, you're like, what the hell did I do with my life? Like it's all passed me by, right?
Yeah, what's
And
the point?
yeah, and obviously that's construction of, the world that we live in, that, speed and doing things fast and like getting to the point and being done. Everyone in the PhD programs like, I can't wait to be done. I can't wait to be done. And it's like, as soon as you start thinking that, and I tell people all this time, as soon as you're thinking about how many miles you have left, you're no longer going to have fun doing what you're doing.
That's right.
Right. And the
That's right.
PhD is the same. As soon as you start thinking about like, I can't wait to be done, then you're no longer present in the moment. And then when you're not present in the moment, you're not open to the opportunities that life presents you. And it sounds like one of the key themes that keeps coming up with you is like, when you allow life to give you opportunities and you take them, life's good. When you're so single track focused and you're just trying to get through life, well, then you don't get any of those opportunities.
Right.
And then life
That's right.
becomes this struggle.
Yeah.
And I think there is this idea that like the more daunting the task, the faster I want to get done with it
Hmm.
because it's going to hurt. And I just want to be done with the hurt. And it's like, well, the hurt teaches you a lot of lessons. Like, there's a reason you chose to do this thing, and every step counts, every mile counts, right? It's not the finish line. It's like the progress to get there. And that's one of the things that I love about life is this. It's this constant strategic game of like problem solving. And the only way you can solve problems effectively is if you look at your next step, not look at the finish line. And I think Art, with his, very insightful words, allowed you to, probably made it more salient. It was something that you probably already knew you needed to do, but you needed someone to tell you that. You needed the injury to happen so that you can reflect on it. And then, yeah, this whole new perspective. And it probably changed the way that you completed the rest of that journey. And like you said, you met some lifelong friends along the way. Um, but one of the things that I would be interested to hear your view on this is like, we do have these things happen. It's like the pain. It's like pain, right? So when something painful happens, it's the most painful thing we've ever experienced in our life, right? You stub your toe and you're like, this is the worst thing ever. Meanwhile, like 5 years ago, you broke your leg and that was the worst thing ever, right? And so we're always on this journey of, today is the worst day ever, or this is the only day. And then you forget about it, right? So you get this life lesson, and maybe you've gone through life and you've forgotten about it, what continues to pull you back? Or what is one of those things where, is this one of those things where it just sits with you all the time? Like, how do you keep that salient in forefront of your mind of like, I don't want to rush through life? Because I'm sure something probably came up in your life where a business opportunity and you get back into that rush mindset. Like, how do you stay present? What are the things that you do in your life to keep you moving through it in a way that allows you to have these interactions and have these meetings? What works for you?
Yeah. Uh, well, I have a practice. I mean, I have a daily practice that I think sets the tone for my day. Um, and I'm not 100% good at keeping that practice, but I do my best. And my best, I think, is enough to at least keep it top of mind. And so that practice is it's a daily yoga meditation and words. So I every morning it's funny. Like, I've been eating the same doggone breakfast for the last 20 years. I've been getting up at nearly the same time every day for the same amount of time. Like, I've got a very like locked down habit based practice that includes about a half hour worth of movement. And I think the easiest thing to call it is yoga. I used to teach yoga, and I practiced for a lot of years in studios, but this is just me at my house, moving my body in a way that feels right for the day. Um, there is a flow sort of that I move through, but it's not anything that, I don't know that it has names or it's just I'm moving my body with a deep awareness of what it wants. So it's about tuning into, all right, today, gosh, my back's a little sore. I'm going to do a couple back stretches and lay on my back and do some stuff. But it's about a half hour of movement preceded by about 5 minutes of just sitting. Um, Meditation, I've always found to be like, people fight meditation, like they fight to do meditation is what I've. And when I was a yoga teacher, I was like, we're meditating when we're moving. Like, you don't need to sit silently and try to control thoughts. Like, that's the opposite of meditation, frankly. I I met this guy, and I don't know what his title would be, but he was a fellow who lived in India for his whole life, born there. And at one point in his life, during his yoga studies, his meditation studies, he he literally lived, like, sequestered himself in like a cave for like a decade or more. I don't remember what the year. It was years worth of just being alone in a dark place and eating whatever people brought him. And I had the good fortune of sitting and having like a proper meal with him in my hometown. He came to town to do a talk, and I got to go have dinner with him. And he said, in America, people don't know, people meditate wrong. Like, in fact, you probably will never, in American society, you're never going to be able to truly meditate because your brain is always going. As an American who's born and raised here, your brain is always going to be going. So you're going to constantly be fighting to meditate. And he goes, if you just pick like one movement every day that you like, do just downward dog. Let's say every morning you decided to just do downward dog for 1 minute. And then maybe after that gets, sort of easy, you do it for 2 minutes and then a little bit longer. And eventually you're doing it for maybe 10 minutes. Who knows? He goes, that's all the yoga you ever need. Because in that, you have awareness, you're probably paying attention to your breath. But either way, he's like, that's your meditation. Just pay attention to one thing. That's enough. And so meditation is one of those words that I try not to use like, oh, well, I meditate, because we judge that. And I don't want that to be the case. I sit for about 5 minutes, sometimes more, sometimes less, sometimes with my eyes open, sometimes not. Sometimes I'm thinking about the day, sometimes I'm thinking about as little as possible. But I sit and then I move and then I get up and I eat my breakfast. So that's a part of my daily practice. And if I take that out of my day, it throws a bit of a wrench in my machine, and I find myself less likely to move in a linear trajectory through the day. I get a little bit more like distracted. I got to go do these other things on my like my C list of priorities. And so I lose sight of what's important when I take my practice out of my day. Um, the other thing that I've been starting to do is midday stops where, and you can do this however, but where I just sort of do this little somatic exercise. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna take my thumb and index finger, and I'm just gonna like roll them together like this, and then I'm gonna open my fingers, and then I'm gonna put them back together and do it again. Like really micro somatic moments of presence where I take and I do that for like a minute. And I feel like what that does is it brings me back to a regulated place where I'm here. A minute before I was maybe over there, or mentally I'm in 10 places at once. But for at least a minute, I'm here. And I found that lately has been a real important tool in my in my bag of tricks for awareness. And I think there's no right way, there's no wrong way, there's nothing necessarily, there's no way to do it that's going to work for everybody.
Right.
But I do think that the one thing that as I've gotten older that keeps me on the rails is my awareness of being there, like just paying attention. Am I there now? No. Okay, what can I do to get back there?
Yeah.
And what can I do to get back landing in this space? So introspection, inward looking, and honesty with self. These things I think are the crucial bits of my life that I think have brought the I don't know, the biggest payoff, emotional payoff, something that has actually made me move through life, I think, with a higher degree of peace.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that you imparted and I try to impart in people is like, it's your thing that brings you awareness of being present. Right. So like, sure, you laid out your routine. It's like, no one should copy that routine because that's what Tom has built throughout his life that works for him. Right.
that's right.
And, so it is one of those things where there has to be I, I feel like there has to be an intent throughout the day of trying to find ways to bring yourself back to being present. It's not
Yeah,
something that comes natural to anyone that I've met. Maybe it does for some people, but this idea of telling people to just be present is like telling somebody to build a house that's never seen a house before.
right.
It's like, what are the
Right.
tools that make you present? Could be journaling. It could be the thing with your finger. It could be
Whatever.
an alarm. Like there's so many things that can bring you back to being present. But I think that is one of the keys to having a life where you can remember the lessons that it has taught you. You have to be able to quiet your mind enough to be present to think about the things that you've learned in life because life is so chaotic that it can
Truly.
be very easy to fall out of that practice. Again, it goes back to the whole pain thing. Like what is happening now is the most important thing in your life to where you can't even think about what happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. So it's like, how can we be thinking about things how can we not have our ego drive like this is the most important thing right now and think about like, no, it's not. Like life is more than this thing that I'm chasing. Like what can I get? What can I stop? How can I stop life from being chaotic right now? And it is those simple things. Everyone should develop a practice that brings them back to being centered, brings them back to having that peace in their life and that quietness. And you are right about meditation. From an athlete's perspective, when I first got into meditation, I was like, all right, I'm going to win meditation. How do I win meditation? Well, I'm going to quiet my mind to where I have
Yeah.
no thoughts ever. Cause that's what enlightenment is, right?
Right.
And it's like, that's not the point of it. And for
No.
me with meditation now, the point is to give yourself time to be aware of what you're thinking. And if you're doing that, then you don't worry about the thoughts that you're not trying to have peace of mind. You're trying to be aware of what's going on in your mind, because trying to control those things, as we know in neuroscience, it just doesn't happen. And
No.
so yeah, so that's awesome that's what you do. And I'd be very curious to know how writing plays a part in not only being able to express yourself, but also being able to create those memories of the things that are important to you. When did writing come about? Because when you were talking about your childhood and the ability to have freedom and creativity, that immediately made me think of like, oh, that's why you're a writer, because you've always had this freedom to think and explore and do all this stuff. When did writing come about in your life, and what does writing do for you, and like what's the practice of writing for you? Because everyone has their practice of, I need to write 10 minutes a day, I need to do this, and you have books and you have blog posts and you have everything that you have. So what has writing done for you? When did it start, and what's your process of writing?
Yeah. Writing to me is a vehicle for discovery. And I think discovery is probably the thing in my life that drives my every single move. I mean, I was in one moment in my life, I was an archaeologist, and discovery, right? Looking for artifacts that are interesting, that tell stories, right? What are the bits and pieces that you can dig and find that will tell you more, and then more thereafter. To me, that's writing, and writing goes back probably to my, I mean, I wasn't that kid that was like, oh, I was writing books for my family when I was a little boy. Like I was writing was something I was good at. I think I probably had nice handwriting and I liked aesthetically what it looked like. So I would write more. I think I'm very visual and I am artistic in that regard. Like I like when a thing sort of appeals to my visual senses. And I think the old days of cursive writing, I love that. I love the artistic stroke that came from making that letter L, in the correct way, and all the little tricks and trades. And my grandma wrote in calligraphy, and I used to mess around with that. So I think writing thoughts became an extension of just the artistic expression of writing one letter. And and so as time went on, there was a time in my early, I'd say teenage years, where I got my hands on. This is gonna sound funny, but I got my hands on like a book of Jim Morrison's poetry.
Okay.
Jim Morrison, right, the lead singer of the Doors, which his poetry didn't make that much sense, just like his songs kind of didn't either. But I was a fan of the music, and so I'm like, oh, I want to go. There's a book on his poetry. I'm gonna go get that, and it spoke to me. We have these interesting moments in our life where you read a thing and whoa, it's just like really hammering your heart. And and I started sort of copying his style, and I'd write my own poems, and then I would give them to friends. Hey, I wrote this for you, and I was able to see their eyes light up, not only because of what I had written, but the fact that I had given them this handwritten
Yeah.
thing. So I saw value, and I think this is a moment too where I needed that kind of validation. I was really trying to be seen as a young person, and this was an opportunity for me to use something that came very easy to me, and also something I quite enjoyed, to sort of fill some of my empty buckets.
Yeah.
I could give you a poem, watch you light up, and as a result, I felt pretty doggone good. Now, that empty bucket needed more than that, but at that moment in my life, that was enough. Um, and that just sort of snowballed. I one poetry book led to more, and next thing you know, I'm reading all sorts of old and new poets, and then friends. That opened up my social circle a little bit differently, because I started meeting people with similar interests, and we'd suggest book titles, and I think that's probably a pretty common story, or how we learn about authors and writing and all that. But my practice as a writer was almost always about just self-expression. I wanted to put how I felt on this paper, because I couldn't necessarily do it with my words. Couldn't speak it. So let me maybe write about how I feel by looking at this tree or looking at this ocean. And 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 metaphor became a really important part of my life. I understood metaphor, and I understood like the really weird deep ones. Like as a younger person, I understood how to talk about grief by writing about an apple. Like I
Yeah.
got that. And I don't know that I even now would be able to explain why or how, but I just got it. Like it just clicked really easily. And and so I was constantly writing, trying to figure out my own metaphors. How can I write about my feeling by using this inanimate object? And then and I would feel so good. It was just me and my page and my pen, and it felt so good. So it became a self-validator. I think my writing became a way for me to truly get to know myself and love myself in a way that I wasn't really taught how to do necessarily, and I surely wasn't necessarily. It was something I needed. I needed to be able to look at myself and be my biggest fan, because I had spent so many years of my life trying to get the people around me to do that for me. And I think writing was the one thing in my life that I could do and truly love having done without needing anybody's thumbs up or thumbs down. Like, in fact, it was many years before I even allowed people to see my stuff, or would have ever. I would never have called myself a writer. And I always thought, well, what would it be like to actually learn how to write? I never took writing classes. I didn't do any of that stuff. I just wrote. But the competitive side of me wanted to be a really good writer, but I was afraid. That I battled that. I really battled that for a while, because it was such a special and intimate thing that I was doing with myself. I didn't want to ruin it by giving it rules,
Right.
and giving it, things that, well, I just, yeah, not giving it rules. I didn't want to play that game. Uh, but in my 30s, I was like, well, I love writing. My dream life would be to just walk and write. That's all I want to do. Just walk and write. Maybe at the same time. Like that would be pretty rad. Do both. But that's really all I wanted to do. And that's been my answer to the question, like, what would you do if you could do anything? Just walk and write. That's it.
Yeah.
And in my 30s is when I started really saying like yes to the things that were honest inside of me, and then making those things happen. That's when I decided, I'm going to go get better at writing, not because I want to be a better writer necessarily. I mean, I do, but I also just want to see. I just want to. I want to. I knew that writing was going to make me better. I knew that. So that was my motivation, and I went and did an MFA in my mid 30s, or actually, it was probably my late 30s. Went and did an MFA in creative writing, and I think during that time frame is when I actually started referring to myself as a writer and believing it. But then also during that time, I realized that my intuition about writing was right, in the sense that the the more I learned how to become a better creator of writing, a better like curator of words, the the more I was becoming a better human being by being a better writer. And the only way I'm not going to be able to explain this very well, because I still am working this out. But what I understand good writing to be is honest writing. And my leaning is towards essays and towards nonfiction stuff, but I think it applies to all. I cannot write a good essay unless I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I can't write a good essay unless I'm really being honest about something, and then being honest about what lies beneath that. And the deeper I dig, the more artifacts I find. The deeper I dig, the more stories I am uncovering about, in a lot of cases, me. And I'm learning now about myself. I'm finding these bits and pieces and nuggets and broken pieces, and I'm finding all of these things that when I put them together, I see a fuller version of myself. And writing now is that. Writing is a place for me to like take all my disparate pieces and start plugging them back in. And who knows, maybe by the time I die, I'll be a fuller version of who I once was, or who I meant to become, I think is probably more like it. Uh, but it's not even about that. It's about finding that one thing. It's the next step. As you
Yeah.
were just saying, like, it's not about what this is ultimately amounting to. Who cares about that? I don't give a shit about that. It's about, oh, I just found this one thing that is shining up of something I already knew about myself. It's making me understand that a little bit more. Boom. It's in my body now. Now let me go find another one. Let me take another step. Writing is walking to me. It's the same doggone thing. It's just two different actions moving the same direction or moving for the same purpose, I think is it. So I don't know if that's really answering,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
question of why and all the things that, we generally ask writers, because I don't really have like that pathway in a way that even I fully understand. But what I know about writing is it makes me the happiest I could ever be. And every time I sit down to write something, or I can't say every time, but many times when I sit down to write a thing, what I think I'm going to say is not what comes out, but what comes out is precisely, number one, what needed to come out. But number two is something that I didn't see, like I didn't know until I sat down to write. And that is such a joy bringer for me. That's discovery,
yeah.
right? That's discovery. It's finding something new. Um, yeah, and I just feel like I could just gush about writing. Like it's like,
I see that. That's
you
awesome.
know, I
Yeah,
will I'll leave it there for now. But like that's what writing has become to me. And
yeah. I mean, I think a couple things that you touched on is this idea that authenticity is what people crave, right? And writing in an authentic way is gonna not only allow you to explore deeper parts of yourself, but it's gonna allow people to read it and think like, yeah, this guy is being real, it's being authentic, and that's what I crave in my life. And the best authors, the best podcasters, the best speakers are the ones that are the most authentic, and you can feel it and you can tell it when they're not being authentic.
sure.
And I think, like you said, part of that idea of like looking ahead in the future creates unauthenticity because you're trying to be that person now, and you haven't even done the work to get there. So you are not authentically you. You're just trying to be the person that you want to be, right? And it's like being present in the moment is an authentic and beautiful thing that writing has allowed you to do. And also, I think the idea of like being able to tell your story is so important, right? And I think that's where writing plays a huge role in people's lives. And I don't think writing gets the credit it deserves for how it can create mentally healthier people, right? When we look at things like emotional intelligence and our ability to regulate emotions to improve mental health disorders, one of the things we think about is like, if you're able to express how you feel, then people know how you feel and then you feel seen. But if you don't have those words, if you don't have that vocabulary, then you're not able to express, and then it becomes frustrating, and then you just give up, right? And because the way the education system is, we don't put a big emphasis on the value of being able to tell your own story, the value of writing. And I think that's something that is so like prominent in order for people to live a healthier and happier life. And I think being able to express yourself is great, and being able to help people express themselves in any way, shape, or form is like the lifeblood of what makes people feel seen and happy and like living their best life. And I hope that as we transition out of hopefully standardized testing, we get into these ideas of like what will make people happier human beings. And it's like writing and creativity and exercise and like not novel concepts, but things that we've pushed to the side for so long. And the way you expressed it makes so much sense to me, and it creates this beautiful picture of what writing can has done for you and what writing can do for other people. And I'm definitely curious to know that once you began publishing, did that ever take any of the like the love away from it, or were you still able to write the way like you wanted to write?
That's a good question. I think part of what academic, well, I should just say what I took away as a part of my MFA was that publishing was really important. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't know, but that was something that I was left feeling marked my value as, or at least alluded to my value as a writer, was getting it published so that other people can see. Now, of course, publishing something allows, for a wider audience. And I think we create so that other people can see our stuff, whether we're an artist or a writer, whatever. Like, that's part of being a creator. So I see both sides, but the impetus was more about value. Like, I'm a good writer. If somebody says, "Hey, I'll take that and put it in my journal," or whatever.
Validation. Yeah.
Correct. So straight out of that program, I did my damnedest to, get stuff in journals, and I did. And each time I did, I was like, "Oh, I must be a good writer then." And I was recognizing that the messaging that was giving me was not probably very healthy.
Yeah.
I it was taking away. I think on some level, it was taking away from the joy, but I was still writing. But I felt like my impetus for it was definitely outcome driven more than it ever had
Yeah.
been.
Extrinsic validation as opposed to intrinsic validation.
Truly, yeah. Um, it was a bit of a crux when I wrote my book about my long walk, and I had never intended to write that book, by the way, but I chose to write that book 2 years after I finished that walk, and call it a quarantine project or what.
Yeah.
But that's when it came out. But I was I pitched that book to a lot of publishers, a whole lot. And now it's very common to pitch books to publishers and get zero response. Like, you just crickets. You just hear nothing back. You don't even get a confirmation that your email went through.
Right.
You get zero. Well, I heard back from, I don't know, I think I probably submitted to 50 different publishers, and I heard back from like 3, which, I mean, that's high percentage under the
That is
circumstances.
huge. Yeah.
Now, I heard back from folks saying no, but from those 3 people all told me no, but they explained why, and their rationale was whatever. They were still saying no, so I didn't know, it wasn't gonna. Their response didn't necessarily change how I was feeling about the no, I guess, is what I'm getting at. But that was a story I really wanted to share. I really wanted to. I had just written 300 plus pages. I wanted to share the story of this book, or of this journey, because it was a book that I would have read. Like, and so I wanted other people to have that opportunity too. And I really had a hard time self-publishing that book, Tony. Like, because there's a judgment, at least an internal, like, within that industry or within the writing world, and maybe it's just my perception, which is very possible, but I'm pretty sure that there's a stigma that comes with
There is.
self-publishing.
Yes. It's not just you. There's definitely
Yeah,
a stigma.
yeah. I don't want to make any universal statements here, but yeah, it felt like I felt like I was putting out, a shitty book because it was self-published. But I was like, you know what? This is what I'm working with. I tried, like, I did my 50 queries. I didn't hear anything back. All right, I'm just going to make it happen. And but that choice forced me to really think deeply about why. Like, why, first of all, why do I care about the judgments of others around me? And
Yeah.
let me really think about the layers of that. And then, like, if I really love what I just wrote, why I should be excited to share it, if nothing else, with my friends at the very least. Like, I didn't
Right.
know it. Honestly, that's the only people I thought were going to buy that book anyway, was my friends, and probably my mom would buy a couple
Right.
copies.
Exactly.
So that moment in time was, in hindsight, really important, because it forced me to do some serious inward looking, and that inward looking took some time, but I think ultimately I ended. I came out of it feeling probably how I felt good about it. Like, I felt like, oh, I made a thing, and it's really good. I'm proud of it. I stand behind it. It doesn't matter how it appears in the world. Like, and if the people who are judging that, they're probably not my people anyways. So whatever. Like, we're good. But I had to battle that. Like, that took some time. So publishing, I think, in is weaved with some baggage, and I needed, and probably still I still need to go through that. And I'm in the process right now of republishing that book with a publisher, and that brings a whole new level of questions and curiosities, because I'm like, oh, okay, well, if I'm thinking of my book as a as a as something that's going to make me some money, self-publishing is the way to go, baby. Like, because that's where you actually see profits, you know. But when you do it with a publisher, they put their little publish stamp on it, and that's cool because it's a proper house. But you know, you probably aren't going to make much money unless it's,
No,
you know,
you won't make
I mean,
much money, but you'll reach a wider audience, right? You'll get your story out there because that's part
that's
of what
right.
the publishers do is they give you their email list, they give you their connections, and you can
Right.
go on maybe a podcast tour where you talk about your book and then get more exposure, and then so there like you said, there's pros and cons to each of it. And I think the biggest thing for me would be like, does it change, like, do they want me to change the story I want? Like, that would be the frustration for me as a
Yeah.
writer, would be, are they manipulating my story to fit their narrative? Am I still able to tell much? Am I still able to write the way that I do? Like with poetry, there's so many rules in poetry of what you have to
Mhm.
follow in order for it to be the correct poem, right? And it's like, I don't want any of those restrictions. I don't want that. I'm not a writer in that way. I understand the benefits of it. It makes
Yeah.
you more concise. It makes you more like, your words have to be chosen very precisely, but it's like it takes away the essence for me. And I just wanted to see if publishing did that for you. And it sounds like you were still able to write the books that you wanted to write in the way that you wanted to write them. Um, and I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's a question you always have to ask yourself. Like, am I still being true to what I want my vision to be, or is it being manipulated in those situations?
I'll tell you, man, I have absolutely embraced the idea of self-publishing.
Yeah.
I, I mean, I'm down. I'm not anti publishing, in the traditional sense at all. But I love the idea of making a thing and then like getting it out there right away. I'm a bit impatient that way. Like if I make something that I want to share, I kind of don't want to sit on my hands and, play around with it. I just want to like get it out there so I can move on to the next project. Like I got shit to say and I got projects to do, man. I don't want to wait on one. If I can do it on my own and just get it out there, I'm going to do that. And the book that that's front and center kind of with my name on it is this memoir that I wrote. But I've got a dozen other books that I've written that aren't even on my website because they're ones that I made for like, my 25 best friends and just sent them out, or like they're projects that I love, like I deeply love, and they probably are something that I could quote do something with, but I already did. And then I moved on. Like it brought me joy. It brought my friends, I was able to give them something too, and they probably liked it too. And then I'm happy about that. But yeah, writing's been curious that way. Actually, just the business of creating has been curious that way. There was a time that I was a painter and I would do gallery shows and things like that. And that bummed me out real fast. Like,
Really? Why is that?
because
You're being
for
your
the
all your paintings are being judged, maybe?
Well, I don't care. I think it was less about that. It was just more like the business of art.
Mm.
I stopped putting my name on art for a long time. And then I started like hanging my stuff up anonymously in random places. Like I would sneak into a hallway or a restaurant or whatever with a piece of art. And when nobody's looking, put a little nail on the wall and hang that sucker up. And I've hung more than 1,000 pieces of art anonymously like that all around the world. Like I used to do, when I would go on business trips, I'd bring pieces with me and hang them up. And when I go travel, I'd bring pieces. And sometimes it's more stealth than others. Sometimes it's
Right.
just public hanging up of art. And oh man, I love doing that. That's fun. Like
Yeah.
that's fun. It's yeah, that to me that's my jam more than hanging up a piece and then having to talk about what that brushstroke means and all that stuff. Like I like making stuff,
Yeah.
and I like I like then displaying or showing that stuff off in a way that suits me rather than along some sort of traditional linear pathway of sort of like social expectation. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of over it. I'm
Yeah.
over it.
No, I understand that. I understand that. One of the things we touched on earlier was this idea of, the people you bring into your life are very valuable, and spending time with them is very valuable.
Yeah.
But also being on the trails is very isolating as well. So you have both of these things happening at once, right? The idea that, yes, we ran into each other on the trail. I don't want people to get the idea that like you're constantly with people. It's very isolating. You're there
Yeah.
by yourself for, 6 to 8 hours a day, especially when you're doing like the Appalachian Trail or something like that. So what pulls you to the trail? What pulls you to walking, and what do you get from that isolation, that solidarity?
I'm really good at being alone. And I think part of that is just because aloneness is something that has been common throughout my whole life. Maybe when I was young, I was because I was shy. Being shy meant I wasn't as social as a bunch of other kids. But I like to be active, so I could be shy and active very easily, and feel comfortable. Uh, and so I think that the adult version of me is, I wouldn't say shy, but I'm more of a watcher first. I'm not necessarily going to like mix up things socially. I'm much more likely to kind of be on the periphery until I find my little comfortable spot, and then I'll pop in and kind of keep things sort of mellow. I don't, I have social anxiety that way.
Hmm.
Nobody believes me when I have shared this because I've gotten so good at it, right? As we do, I've gotten good at navigating those sorts of moments that maybe bring out the most anxiety in me. But being alone is an opportunity for me to not have to worry about anything else but me. And I like that. And I think these days being alone is different, but I think there was a time when being alone was where I could breathe, was where I could just kind of like, whew, I don't need to put on any airs. I don't need to pretend I'm somebody that I'm not. I don't have to worry about the next thing that I'm going to say. There was a time when I needed you to see me, where I really wanted you to be impressed by me. And when I'm alone, I don't need to think about any of that stuff. And so I think in my younger years, solitary adventure, or at least adventure like with, maybe one other person, where it was, very insular and quiet, um, was appealing for reason, because it allowed the real me to come out, and not this contrived version of me that I was trying to be, but that wasn't necessarily, the who I truly was at heart. I think as I've gotten older, though, what I've realized is that I just like being alone, man. I
Yeah.
just like it. There might have been a strategy behind it before, but now, like, I'm not afraid to be alone with myself. I, I'm good. In fact, I can go days and days walking, moving along on a trail with no music, no podcasts, no nothing. Like when I walked across the United States, I didn't listen to anything, just
Mm.
me. I listened to footsteps and cars. Too many cars, but yeah, I enjoy the opportunity to just walk. And what I know now is that walking. Let's be honest. Like walking, it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's not awesome, but it's kind of boring. But boredom is required for creativity to truly like show its face. And I believe and appreciate the fact that I can go out for a walk and never once be like bothered by that aloneness. And in fact, if anything, I am very available to whatever is percolating. And because I'm by myself, because I'm not being distracted really by anything, I'm noticing these things as they creep up. And And as I've gotten older and maybe thinking about more things and more life experiences, the things that are popping up are really great meditations on previous experiences or, future aspirations. And I get to see them clearly because I'm generally alone. Now, the other thing that I should add, Tony, is that like I hike fast. I'm a
Yeah,
fast
you're
mover.
very fast.
Alone is something that I think also just is the result of the fact that I don't have many hiking buddies that go my pace. Like,
Right.
and I'm not saying that to shine a light on, because I have a fast pace, but I'm not like out there trying to beat people. I just walk fast, and I've only met a couple people that keep pace with me for more than a couple miles. So that's probably a factor in the aloneness too. It's just by the nature of my gait.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely very fast. It's interesting. Like whenever I'm hiking by myself, or even with Emma, there's a lot of silence, and it's so like when I did my first 100, people were like, "Oh, I bet you learned a lot about yourself and all this other stuff." And I was like, "Not really. Like I learned a lot about really bad music that I can't control from repeating in my mind over and over and over again."
Totally. Oh, I
And I'm
love
like,
this.
how do I get this out of my mind? Why is this song coming up? I don't even like this song, but I like hours go on and you're just like, I guess this is what I'm working with right now. And it's fascinating the stuff that
Oh, I love
to
it.
me that's what's the best part about it is like what's gonna pop up in my mind today, and is it going to be profound or is it just going to be like stupid and laughable, um and you don't control any of it. And I think that there's some beauty in that. There's some beauty in going to places where you're like, you just don't have control and you just
Yeah,
let it go and let it rip. And like what comes. And you may go on a walk and think like, I'm going to think about some profound stuff. And just like meditation, you're there for like 3 minutes. And then all of a sudden your mind drifts to, some horrible song or
totally.
some mantra that you just like things that go on. So there is some profound moments in there, but there's also a lot of garbage, a lot of junk. I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
you
99%
right.
garbage. And or
Exactly.
just like random, like maybe not garbage, but it's just random. Like your music for sure. And I'm laughing at that because like I wrote down so many of the songs in my last I just got off the trail. I was on for like 4 weeks. But I was writing down these songs because I'm like, these songs are coming out of nowhere. They're not even bands that I know the names of. It's just like a tune that maybe I have some nostalgia for from like the 70s. Like, where is this song coming from? And yeah, it just is. It's your subconscious just like releasing. And so profound thoughts are really rare. I think if you go out thinking, "Oh, I'm going to go out and have a life changing thought experience," you're not going to have any of that. Like, be prepared for nothing, as you say. Junk is going to like come out of your brain. I think that stuff makes room
Yes.
for other things, right? So we have to release that. We have to, and noticing is comical. So it's fun to see the weird stuff that comes out, and maybe you catch yourself singing or some homemade song that just appeared out of nowhere too, or maybe you're thinking about some really ridiculous, like it just doesn't make sense. But I believe that's like it's like boiling. It's boiling things off that are just like clutter,
Yep.
and inevitably you're going to find something magical in there,
Yeah.
something really special. um, I wrote about this in a recent Substack, uh, and I'll share it with you here because it's exactly what we're talking about. You have a couple days on the trail where your brain is just kind of firing, you're singing random weird songs, you're having all the things we're just talking about, and then inevitably there's like a quiet, and you're walking, and it's just your foot strikes and maybe a little breeze, some trees, and you're paying attention to very little. You're not even aware that it's quiet. And then all of a sudden, something hits you, a thought, maybe, or a memory, or maybe just like a feeling that you don't even really have a thought associated with. And it's the sort of thought or feeling that immediately, like, blinds you in a sense that you feel an emotion that is so overwhelming that you're weeping, and you don't maybe even know why. But those moments to me are what the trail has to give. Those are the gifts that the trail will give you if you let it. Right? We can distract ourselves with all sorts of other things, but when we are out there and just and open and vulnerable, as we've been talking about, the trail will give you something that you need, whether you realize you need it or not. And you might not even understand it. I was out there this past time, and I started reciting like eulogies to people in my life who are still alive.
Mhm.
I was talking to them as if they were walking alongside me. Hey, Tony, here's what I know about you. Here's what you brought to my life. Here's what I feel. And here's what I'll never forget about you and our time. Like, I was having these not even I was eulogizing the living people in my family. And in every single case I was absolutely weeping.
Yeah.
And I don't know where this came from. I don't know why I was doing this. I can't even say that there was necessarily a result that I was like, well, yeah, I understand that. I have absolutely no understanding of what went down. And it lasted a solid hour.
Yeah.
I mean, I put miles behind me. Time went by. I didn't see anybody. There was not even, I feel like there weren't even birds chirping for an hour. I was just in this space, moving and speaking aloud these profundities that just melted me. And if anything, that the end result of that was just me realizing that the trail knows what I need.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know exactly what I need, but the trail knows. And if I open myself to it, it's going to give it to me. And the trail in that regard is like the most important thing that I could ever include in my life. And if I go out there and shed what the versions of me that that are just in the way, and I just walk, well, as they say, what, like, solvitur ambulando, right? All is solved, or it is solved by walking.
Yeah.
And it's true. You will be given something that you need.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of neuroscience to back that up. And the idea that you're talking about is definitely felt. I've had those feelings. I've never heard it expressed that way, which is great because it relates to meditation. It also relates to psychedelics as well. And
Mm,
why psychedelics have a profound effect on people is because whenever you do them, like say mushrooms, for instance, you take the trip and then you get inundated with all these geometrical like everything, and you're just flushed with like all this stuff. And you go through that for about an hour to an hour and a half, and then it's gone, and then it's just you and your empty brain because it's just been overwhelmed, and now you have silence and now you have thoughts, right? And that's what you got from the trail. Like you've put in the work to get through the junk, so to speak, to
right.
empty your mind and now allow yourself the opportunity to explore. And it goes back to like reward with effort. Effortful things you do in your life will give you a reward. But reward without effort is where you get like substance abuse and addiction and all this other stuff. So when you put in the work mentally, like meditation does, like being on the trail does, you have to go through that process of like get it out, get it out, get it out, get it out, all these random thoughts. And then all of a sudden your brain's like, all right, like I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'll let you explore what you need to explore now. And it does. It just, the thing that you need is what it gives you. And it's a beautiful thing. And the way you put it is amazing. And obviously with writing and everything, you're able to eloquently talk about that stuff. So it's awesome that you said that, because that's definitely, I have to imagine that's what everybody's felt. But you put it into words, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, I am in such gratitude of having found something in my life that is able to I think give me something that feels right, feels good, feels deep. Um, yeah, I just feel very fortunate for an opportunity to be out there to do that. I mean, I want everybody to have that, something like that in their life, and it's just not as accessible. So my good fortune is not lost on me, nor will it ever. And so, as any chance I get, like I get off the trail and I immediately start planning what my next thing is going to be.
Yeah.
It's just it's a very integral part of my life, and I'd be I'd be a fraction of myself without it, for sure.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. And then you get back on the trail and it's like you're a kid at Christmas. You're like, I can't believe I've gone so long without being on the trail. It's a magical place. It's a beautiful thing. And I appreciate you coming on and being able to share those stories with us.
Heck
Can
yeah.
you go ahead and let us know your website, your Substack, and also put those in the notes so if people want to follow along and look at your books and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. You want me to rattle them off to you
Yeah, if you
here?
don't mind.
Yeah, yeah. So my website is my name, Tom Griffen, tomgriffen.com. Griffin is not spelled in the traditional way, and it's always confusing. My last name is spelled En, not In, but whatever. You'll find me at some point.
Yeah,
So tomgriffen.com, or where you can find my writing, which I would encourage you to check this first, is on Substack. It's a free place to read some essays, both mine and a whole bunch of other amazing writers. And I'm there also under my name, or if you type in "With a Good Heart," which is both my book title and also my Substack name, "With a Good Heart," will get you there as well. So yeah, that's where you can find my stuff. And like Tony said, I guess we'll put it in the notes too.
yeah. Perfect, Tom. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing everything that you did. I think there's some very, very insightful stuff in here, and just being able to chat with you is always a pleasure, man. So I appreciate your time.
Oh, well, the feeling is mutual, Tony. It's been a real joy to reflect on, what happened to make this happen. And then also share some of these stories. I hadn't thought about a lot of this stuff before or in a while, and that feels good. I got food for thought for days here.
Perfect, Tom. Well,
Oh,
thank you
thank
for your
you.
time.
And
Yeah,
I appreciate your time too, Tony. It's a real pleasure to sit with you.
yeah. Likewise.